I'm kind of intrigued by the title. So I think I'm hoping that by the end of the talk that it'll all become clear, and also the John Kerry image as well that was in the banner for the talk. So thank you very much for being on here today.
Yeah. Well, maybe I'll get you know, at the bottom of this title thing at the start. Basically, John Kerry at some point was criticized for voting against some kind of budget or whatever. But he said to his defense, well, I voted for it before I voted against it, which you know, it's pretty funny. Because he made ridicule of himself later when campaigning and all that, and he accepted the joke as it stood. And the other thing is that when you take a fork in the road, well, take it. This is from Yogi Berra. Yeah. And basically, 10 years ago, the Kanban method took a fork in the road. There was a fork. They took the fork, and they left the theory of constraint behind. And today, well, there's a new fork being offered to the Agile community, and it is the one that will embrace fully the teaching of Eli Goldratt regarding the theory of constraint, regarding throughput accounting, and a lot of other things that are covered in Tameflow. So there's a fork in the road. So take it, is my message. And if I may start, that will put the end to the multiple messages that were present in my...
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And just one other thing I want to say as well for people, so they can have an idea why you're here. So last year, I reviewed the new Tameflow book, Tame Your Workflow, and it kind of broke my brain a bit. And I like talking to people who break my brain. So really delighted about that. So over to you, Daniel. I'm going to put your presentation up, and I'm going to remove myself from the video. And when comments come through, I will put them up, and I'll come back on video to just address the comments. Thank you very much for coming, Daniel. Appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, I'm so happy to be meeting you again, John. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
So is my presentation up now, and I can go?
It's up. You can go ahead. I'm going to remove myself from the stream now, and you can continue. Thank you.
Okay, good. So this little sentences here is talks to me a lot, because when Steve and I wrote the book, it really struck me, you know. And the Tameflow approach, we are not concerned about the execution of the plan, but more specifically about the execution of the work that was previously planned, hopefully, with leading indicators and with a management by exception pattern. So it's a pretty heavy sentence, and we'll see why in the next couple of minutes. The book that John was talking about, Tame Your Workflow, by Steve Tandon and myself, Daniel Doiron, has been out for the better part of three months, very well received, very few attacks in terms of it doesn't make sense or things like that. Of course, the book Tame Your Workflow is 99% thought leadership by Steve Tandon, and 99% transpiration by myself. So we're not the new kids on the block, you know. Tameflow's been around, and since 2011, and we're even projecting forward to way past 2020. So the body of knowledge is there. There's a big community of Tameflow practitioners out there, and although we're a bit like a sleeper community, you know, we've not risen to the top, but it's welcoming on its way. So what is Tameflow Kanban? Tameflow Kanban is inspired by the theory of constraint, pattern theory, and also the incremental funding method. It's not an alternative to the Kanban method. It's a variation of the Kanban visual management method. And it's practice-driven. Okay, it's an evolution on the core practice number six of the Kanban method. Improve collaboratively, evolve experimentally, using models and the scientific method. There's more. The Tameflow approach does not have reference processes or practices like Lean or XP. Does not have reference roles, artifacts, or ceremonies like Scrum. Does not have principles and values like Agile and the Kanban method. Does not have maturity levels like CMMI and KMN. And does not have a reference framework that must be adopted and adapted to any situations, like Scrum, Nexus, Safe, Let's, and Scrum at Scale. So now we're getting into the explicit risk management content, which is the entire purpose of this presentation. Basically, Tameflow builds on the Kanban method. And we're going to go from event-driven risk management, which is a Kanban method, to, and a lot of other methods, to explicit risk management. And we're going to discuss a bit Tameflow Kanban, what it brings to the table in terms of new thought leadership. Event-driven risk management. We're focused on throughput, okay? This event-driven, the Kanban Tameflow is based on throughput, as opposed to traditional Kanban, which we might say is more focused on lead time. And there's something interesting to be said about lead time and throughput, and it comes from Kurt Osler. Kanban's background in product development and maintenance might focus on lead time, where being quick to market is important. But many companies just need to get more things done in less time rather than faster and cheaper, which is where improving throughput comes in. Okay? So everybody's familiar with Little's Law. A lot of time is being put on WIP and lead time or cycle time, or we're basically focused on the throughput part of the equation. So basically, Tameflow builds on the Kanban method. Why? Because Kanban method seems to discount or even ignore the constraint in the process. And this is where Tameflow can add new tools and improvement opportunity for anybody using the Kanban method. Now let's do a bit of memory lane stuff with the Kanban method. Kanban method is really, is what it is. It was a first to propose a fantastic alternative to knowledge work. And let's see what lean manufacturing's impact on risk management is. So, original Kanban and TPS on the top line there, you got a signal for building a car. So the card goes all the way down. And then on the bottom line, parts of a car and a car comes, and finally, the car is done. If anything happens in that process of risk materialization, well, you're going to see it, and you're going to act on it immediately by, what we call pulling the and-done cord. So there's no explicit risk management involved because, there's no plan. You're building cars, so are you going to get a table out of this? No, you're going to get cars. So the outcome is never at risk, right? Why do we need a explicit risk management? Explicit risk management being that you have a plan or estimations, and you've got outcome from that, and you can see the variation and adapt and improve, on certain things that could be triggered by common cause variation. So Deming said, hey, I have no plan and I have no estimation. I'm making cars all the time. There's no explicit risk management needed. because only special cause is needed. You see a problem, you pull the end on cord. You're on the bus, you want to stop, you pull this thing. And in the plant on the right, doing the car where you just pull the end on cord, same principle. The thing will come to a stop. And you check things out. This is why common cause variations are ignored. It comes from the world of lean manufacturing. And in lean manufacturing, you have a problem, you see it, pull the cord, special cause variation. But Donald Ryanson told us that common cause variation have a huge impact in knowledge work. And this is where the low-hanging fruit lie in terms of making money and really improving where it counts. But an Agile and Kanban method as well, as we know it today, there's no such provision to manage common cause variation. So the big improvement opportunities are nowhere to be found. So what happens when you have a Kanban board and you want to improve? Oh, visual signals. So we may have a problem there, and we'll go and we'll fix it. Kanban method is strong on visual, and it's perfectly fit for that. And visualization is really it's key for everybody. And your Kanban board, the visual clues that you'll get out of it, you basically allow anybody to pull the end on cord and to storm on the board and see what those visual signals mean, if they mean anything at all. So leaving out estimations, as we do, prevents us from using quantitative risk management techniques, which are basically essential to managing common cause variation. You have no plan, no estimations, no way to analyze the deviations from the plan. Well, you got no common cause identification possible, and you're missing out on big improvement opportunities. But the Kanban method has a lot of offer as a replacement to estimation, and they're very powerful. WIP load, flow time, cycle time, touch time, due date performance, throughput, flow efficiency, defect rates, failure load. No fantastic tools. Easy to understand, easy to visualize on the board, and you basically get the feedback right away, which beats pretty much all the other managerial approach and is a superior approach. But without explicit risk management, the Kanban method could still, there's still room for improvement, like schedule management, buffer management, risk management, root cause analysis, people factor, and continuous improvement. These things can all be improved upon. And the one that I would, be really concerned with is the continuous improvement bit. If you don't focus on the constraint of your system and you're improving anywhere, well, where are you improving and to what effect? If you improve away from the constraint, you're just basically spending money and creating layers of overcost, which will basically create your own demises. You will hurt yourself, and fixed costs will go up and go up and go up and go up if you don't focus on the constraint. So David Anderson, brilliant. When he did the Kanban method, came to the conclusion that visualization was very important, that column width limit will sustain the evolutionary change. He looked at this 5 focusing step of the theory of constraint and thought it made pretty good sense. But apart from the 5 focusing steps, he didn't think there was much more that would be worthy of including in the Kanban method. Specifically, the thinking process. He thought that the TOC's thinking process was too much of a prescription and would generate improvements which were too much in a big bang approach and not in an evolutionary setting, which he thought, rightfully so, would be the way to go. So the 5 focusing step, he adapted. He's all for it, and it's part of the Kanban method. Although they tend to focus more on bottlenecks than on the constraint, but that is a discussion to be had another time. So after the 5 FS, the 5 focusing steps, everything from the body of knowledge of the theory of constraint and throughput accounting, he decided to do without, because of mainly that he found it difficult to find constraints and knowledge work, and also he was under the impression that the constraints and knowledge work were moving all the time. So what's the point, right? And thinking processes, according to him, the thinking process did not lead to evolutionary change. So basically, this is the thinking process here. And if you see the red arrow right on the future reality tree, right? This is where really David had big issues. And because of that, he basically threw away that and a lot of other chunks of the theory of constraint. And Steve Tandon, who is the leader of the Tameflow approach and the conceptor and the basically said that taking everything beyond the focusing step, the 5 focusing step, and throwing this away was like throwing away the baby with the water. Okay, some parts of the thinking process is not particularly good for an evolutionary approach, but there's still a lot of stuff that's good that's been taken away. So what did Tameflow take of all of this? Well, theory of constraint, the 5 focusing step, the logical thinking process, evaporating cloud, throughput decision, drum buffer rope, critical change project management, and strategies and tactics 3. Okay, and other stuff too. But we've never let go of Tameflow, that is, of all of these components that basically can be applied to knowledge work and that can help us identify common cause variation. Again, common cause variation is where the low-hanging fruits of improvement are, just there for you to grab. So in Tameflow approach, evolutionary change is simply triggered on focusing on the 3 constraints. Because we know how to see them, we know how to identify them, we know how to manage them, and we know how to tweak them. This is what Tameflow has been doing for the last almost 10 years now. So it's constraint in the workflow, constraint in the work process, constraint in the work execution. Wow. How do I find the constraint in the workflow? It's not pretty hard. It's the team that has the highest workload in front of it. That'll be team A. It means the work distribution coming toward A, make it so that these guys, A, are this team is the constraint in the workflow. Knowing now that team A is the constraint in the workflow, well, we look at the flow efficiency board of team A, and we see that integration takes 5 days on average for tickets to go through. So integration is the constraint and the work process of team A, which is the process, the constraint, and the workflow. So we know where the constraint team is, and the constraint process within the process of that team. So what do we do when we need to instrument for a constraint in the work process? Well, team A is constraint, and we got two boards. The team A is going to have to adopt the instrumentation of two boards, which are based on throughput, the drum buffer rope Kanban board, or the throughput management Kanban board. Now, the other teams, B, C, and D, they need not worry about these throughput management board. They can just go with a flow efficiency board and go about their business. Now, if tomorrow team D becomes the constraint and the workflow, team D instruments Kanban boards, throughput management board, and team A goes down and can use a flow efficiency Kanban board. Now, of course, the third constraint is the constraint in the work execution. So we've got, three projects executing. They can be on relative scales and different business domains and of different amount of money, but they're all put on a relative scale. And basically, you're calling a portfolio meeting on week 9. And if you're inviting project A on week 9 on a portfolio meeting, well, you're just wasting your time because team A is doing well. And team A, by a paradigm of management by exception, which is very strong in Tameflow, you will not attend the meeting if your leading indicator is green. And we've got many leading indicators of risk materialization. This is only one of them. However, you can be sure that team C is going to attend the meeting. It's going to have to be prepared. And team B now is sort of in between in week 9 and may not have to attend the meeting. So the cost of decision making at the portfolio management level is so high because we invite everybody that it really defeats the purpose of decision making at the portfolio level. Now we're going to get into explicit risk management. Basically, this is the purpose of this whole gathering that we're having together. Explicit risk management. Explicit risk management makes a difference between special and common cause variation. All other agile approaches basically can only deal with special cause variation, and also by management by exception. You know, when we see something, when something happens, we'll have leading indicators that's telling us, hey, we have a problem. Now, estimation planification is waste, and this comes from lean manufacturing. Because production adopts a pull system, and due to the nature of pull systems, there's no sales forecast. So, because it's becoming redundant. So if you don't have sales forecast, a sales plan, you've got nothing to take the variations from a plan. And estimation is also optional in Kanban. Okay, my slides are a bit out of sync here. And also, the theory of constraint to some extent come to the conclusion that forecast and planning can be an impediment. So how can we build, since planning is waste in lean, and since Agile says no upfront planning, what do? I think the only solution is to get to a plan that costs nothing, right? It cannot be waste, it costs nothing, and it's there, and we can do explicit risk management. That's very smart. Now, where will we focus that plan? On the scope axis or on the time axis? Well, we're not going to go with iterations and time boxing because we know it doesn't work. And we also know that Kanban is based on flow, right? So we'll go with the flow approach. And the flow approach, by having a fixed scope and letting time takes its course, is pretty smart in terms of degrees of freedom, because time unrolls in only one way. You can't go back. You can only go one way. So there is inherent simplicity in approaching this approach. When you have a scope and you're going by iteration, you take your business requirement with the 50 items that are in the table of content, and if you want variability, well, there you have it. Scope can go in any given direction. So when you stop your iteration and when you stop the clock, all sorts of marvelous things can happen. And this is one reason that they have to pull the plug to kill all the variability and start anew when variability sets in again, and so on and so forth. So by having a fixed scope, it brings simplicity by letting the time go to fill that scope. Now, some very powerful leadership here. With the theory of constraint and CCPM, which is the project management approach of the theory of constraint, we can get leading indicators of risk materialization, and we can have just-in-time risk registry compilation. Why did I bold it, italize this, and underline this? Because it's very nice for some approach to keep a tab on everything that goes wrong. But if they don't have the signal as to when it happens, what is the point of writing this down and meeting at the risk review in a month's time to see what happened? Well, you don't know if it had an impact. That's the problem. And when you have just in time, because when you have a leading indicator that something's happening, well, you can put your registry, your root cause analysis artifact in line in real time, and that day, today, see what's happening, instead of waiting in 2, 3, 4 weeks at the risk review when all of these things have become stale news. So what did we take? What did Tameflow take from the CCPM? Critical chain project management, which is the opposite, which is a very different approach than the PMI approach, which is critical path project management. Well, Tameflow only took the buffer and signaling part of CCPM. It did not take anything else. It did not take anything else. So that's what we took. The project buffer to take the signals that can be taken when the plan is being executed, and we're actually deviating from that plan. And it's pretty nice because it gives us an expected variation, a normal variation like common cause, and abnormal variation, mostly special cause variation. So we've got a plan of 36 days at the top. And what does CCPM tell us to do? You chunk the plan in two. So the plan of 36 days go to 18 days. And with this 18 days, you add a 50% buffer. Okay. Why? As Dr Goldratt suggested this, because people in their plan put a lot of things that could be due to common cause variation, inflated estimates, sandbagging, student syndrome, Parkinson's law. I'm not going to go through what each of those mean. We all know what they are. So basically, we take that buffer, we chop it by 50%, we put it at the end. Critical path management just takes buffers on every task, and the critical chain project manager takes that buffer and puts it at the end of the project to act as buffer penetration signals. So basically, that's what happened. For each item or for each project or minimum viable increment structure, we have an average flow time for all of your work items. And you remember, if you do Kanban, lead time, average flow time is the same thing. You got this data, okay? So there's nothing new to gather, it's there. If you do Kanban properly, you've got your cycle time data, your lead time data, whatever you want to call it. In Tameflow, we call it flow time. So for a report, for a design, for a test or whatever, you take your average flow time, okay? And you take it all the way to the mean, which gives you a 50% due date performance. And you add a buffer, a 50% buffer on that. This is what, like CCPM does. CCPM, what it does first is finds the time that you have and chops 50%. And in Tameflow, we get the 50% data, which we have with the average flow time, and we add the buffer on top of that. Slight difference, but it works. This is another example of task, but it could be for projects. It could be for my minimum viable product. It could be for anything. You take all of your tasks, you put the gray into the core of the project, and you put the buffers on each stack at the end for buffer management. We're coming to what it means now in a very short while. Now, if this buffer penetration there goes into green, yellow, or red, because as the schedule is being consumed at 10%, and as the buffer is consumed at 5%, 10%, or 20%, you will either get a green signal, a yellow signal, or a red signal. And this tells you something's happening to the execution of your plan, and that you should act, and that you should update your risk registry and your root cause analysis registries as well. So the buffer has three zones. When the buffer is in green, no worries. When it's a yellow, normal variation, common cause, most probably, not always, most probably. And in the red, you're probably running into special cause variation, most probably, not always, because you got to always do your root cause analysis to know what happens, okay? Now we're talking buffers. Remember Donald Reinhardt, buffer principle 11, the buffer principle? Buffers trade money for variability in a reduction. Now, the CCPM buffer, has it cost us money? No, not at all, zero. But we have a buffer, and the buffer comes for free, and it's not to absorb variability, as many people could think it is. The buffer is mainly there to tell you there's risk materialization, and it's an advance warning, so you know what's coming. And in a way, it will absorb variability, but indirectly, okay? So it is a leading indicator of risk materialization. So there is a little example here on the buffers and buffer penetration. I will not go through it, okay? But I will leave the slides there for 5 seconds. And if you want to do it, then you'll have time to come view the video, print screen it, and do it yourself, okay? So this is 100 work items that are coming into a move or an MVP or a project or whatever, same thing. Then this is the formula. I'm leaving it for 5 seconds. So you take a print screen, and you can work it at home. And then you got the solution. So basically on this little problem, okay, we have got a buffer penetration of 29%, okay, which is less than 33%. And we know we have variation, but we're in the green. So that's good. Okay. Now we see this buffer variation penetration representation. But this buffer penetration representation can also be made into a bar chart as follows. The one on the top and the one on the bottom don't refer to the same problem. Okay, they're totally different. There's no link between the two. But it's yet another way to represent the buffer penetration. And why is it that I'm doing this? Well, you know, I want to build a bridge between different schools of Kanban out there. Look at the scale, and look at what happens when you put this underneath a CFD. Lately, there's been talk like CFD has drawbacks, and it's true. CFD has drawback in terms of analytical power, but the buffer penetration bar chart has a lot of power in terms of analytical potential. And if you put one behind the other, because then they're on the same time scale, well, you can see way before the bottleneck happens on the CFD, 6 days. 6 days before you're getting a signal to act, before you can actually see it on the CFD. So is CFD good? I love CFDs. I love CFDs. But if they're meant only to be used after the fact, I like something that is predictive. I like something that is in real time, which the CFD is not. Okay, like Daniel Vacanti says, yeah, it's of limited value. But if you put the buffer chart, the chart bar underneath it, hey, suddenly your CFD comes to life. Comes to life in real time. So Tameflow Kanban builds on the Kanban method. And we're nearing the end of the, the presentation. What most approaches fail at is not the planning itself, but and how the execution is managed. And this is a lesson to be had because it's a paradigm shift for everybody. We're not doing that. We're weak at execution. Now, there's a lot of talk, you know, oh, sense and respond, oh, inspect and adapt, and sense and respond here, and inspect and adapt here. Well, can you actually physicalize this and materialize these thoughts? Well, it's possible with Tameflow Kanban. Sense and respond? Well, go ask the other brands of Agile, how do you do that? Well, Tameflow would tell you, it's with buffer management. And inspect and adapt. What does trigger an inspect and adapt action? Oh, well, we do it this way, then do it this way. Well, inspect and adapt with buffer signals will tell you when. There's nothing wrong, there's nothing worse than sending your employees on wild goose chases because you interpret a signal as noise and noise as signal. Okay? And you lose your credibility, as a matter of fact. There's nothing wrong than sending people on a wild goose chase. And for God's sake, we're here to work. And we're here to work when indicators, advanced managerial indicators tell us to work. I think I could go on for a while, but it's a nice place to start because there's a lot of stuff. And if John, it's okay with you, I can stop here or I can go on.
Yeah, you can. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you just about a couple of things, and I'm going to bring in Nader, and then I'm going to bring in Remick if he can connect his devices. Remick, your devices aren't connected at the moment. So Daniel, just on what you just mentioned there about noise and signal, can you give us an example of noise and an example of signal so that we kind of understand a bit more what you mean by that?
Well, a signal basically tells you when you're in the Wheeler mode and Schuhart mode of management. Schuhart and Wheeler will tell you that when you cross the yellow zone, okay, I'm going to go with one, right? Yeah. When you cross the yellow zone and the red zone, okay, if I am here, I don't know if you can see me.
I can see your mouse moving, yeah.
Yeah, let's say that I'm here, okay?
Yeah.
This could be a noise, okay? But I say as a manager, oh, no, it's a signal. Hey, Bob and Mike, go figure out what this is. And you're sending them on a wild goose chase. I assume they have better things to do. And when you got something here on top of the red, it's probably a signal, and someone comes and tells you, hey, this happened, or this happens, and it's noise, don't worry about it. So having a quantitative method to help you, and by the way, trend analysis, when you have processes that are not under statistical control, is very important to detect noise and signals, trends, stuff like that. So probably there, in both cases, as a matter of fact, the managers gave the wrong answers, and the system is just going to go worse and worse. It's basically taking action when you shouldn't and not taking action when you should have had. Okay? So...
okay, that's kind of, I'm relieved by that, because I probably misunderstood earlier on, because you said you always do root cause analysis, but you probably meant that in a particular context, because if you were to do root cause analysis all the time, that would be like tinkering, wouldn't it, from a systems thinking point?
But you're not doing... Okay. You're doing root cause analysis and things like that when you actually have buffer penetration in the yellow zone or the red zone.
Yeah, got it.
Right? Yeah. Only there. You don't...
Yeah. You don't want to be looking at because then you're just going to be like whack-a-mole manager.
Yeah, I know. But if someone comes and tells you on day 3, oh, something happened, well, you know that you're nowhere near the yellow zone nor the red zone, and you say, let it be, Yeah, but it's important. Yeah, but it's not impacting me, right?
Yeah.
If something happened and it's not at the constraint, it's probably not going to happen, even if it happens every day.
Thank you very much, Daniel.
Huh?
Thank you. I'm going to bring in Nader at this point, just see if Nader's any comments or questions. So just going to join him to the stream now. Welcome, Nader.
Hi, thank you, John. Thank you, Daniel. Enjoyed the presentation. I have one clarifying question just to get it right for me in my head. Yeah. When we're talking about buffer management, I think in the Tameflow and TOC, my understanding is what we're talking about is a scheduled buffer.
Okay, go on.
And when Don Reinson is talking about, I think he's talking about buffer in the sense of limiting queue length, in other words, the number of work items in progress. I think he's looking at buffer from that perspective, whereas now we're looking at a scheduled buffer. So just wanted to clarify my understanding and understand from you where I'm wrong.
Okay. And the perspective of Donald Reinson, a buffer is a buffer. You can have buffers on resources. You can have buffer on the schedule. You can have a buffer on the budget. You can have buffer on any kind of risk that you may find. Okay? Buffer, trade, money for variability. That's the thinking, and it's right, of Donald Reinson. If you go into a project, and any kind of project, there's 5 there's 5 risks, or there's 5 constraints, and each of them, allow you to plan for buffers, to put buffers at their places. Now, the Tameflow buffer for the CCPM buffer is a buffer on the schedule. You are so right, but it is not a buffer for absorbing variability, which Donald Reinson's buffer are always there for, to absorb variability. So you trade money for variability. What we're telling you is the buffers in Tameflow are free, and they serve as leading indicator of risk materialization. Different stuff.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Nader. If you have any other comments or questions, Nader, I'll come back to you. Do you have anything do you have anything else that you think on your buffer there, or queue rather, that you want to come back to later on?
No, I'm okay for now. Thanks, John.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Nader. Okay, Ramik, you're up. Your camera isn't on, but you're on the stream. Do you have any questions for us?
No, thank you very much.
Oh, you don't have any questions? Okay, all right. Okay, that's fine. I'll remove Ramik from the queue. Thank you very much. We've got Jersey joining up now, so Jersey, I'll bring you in. Jersey, your camera is off and your device is off, so we can't really communicate with you just yet. So if you could just check your audio setup, I'll try to bring you back on very, very soon. I'll keep an eye on your connection. Thank you.
In the meantime, I'll have a quarantini drink.
Very good, very good. I had another couple of questions for you, Daniel, if that's okay. So,
hey, I'm here until you tell me to go.
Thank you, yeah. And Jersey, when you're ready as well, I'll bring you back in. So I'm very familiar with like current reality tree and future reality tree. I remember using it on a fairly big piece of work in 2016, and it was really, really helpful to find some injection points, or where can you make a difference. But you mentioned strategy and tactic trees. What do you mean by those?
Well, we theory of constraint is a notion. Okay, I mean, Steve. I think Steve Tendon confided in me that he's been reading and going through this like for the last 10 years or 15 years very intensely, and he has a lot of content that he still has to discover. For my part, I only master the content of the theory of constraint and all these trees that is needed for me to exercise Tameflow, and I would admit my ignorance and the last 2 things that you said. But the current reality tree is something that we address in the class. I'm good at it. I'm not an expert, but this theory of constraint is a big body of knowledge. And what Steve has done is that he has distilled it down into bits and pieces that are really easy to understand. And this is the beauty of the model. It is simple.
Okay.
But the theory of constraint is big. It's so big.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Just one other question then about Monte Carlo. I didn't hear any reference to Monte Carlo probabilistic forecasting, and is that a thing in Tameflow as well, or is that de-emphasized in Tameflow?
Tameflow doesn't prescribe or restrict anything as long as it's praxis driven and it works and can help you. But I don't think that we address it, one way or the other. But Monte Carlo definitely is a good way that you can scientifically make estimations and things like that, forecasting. So I wouldn't say that we're for or against it.
It's but you kind of be more inclined to use the fever charts, would you, to kind of
Well,
give an indication when something's going to land?
Okay. Lead time metrics and flow time metrics are there, and this is what we love. T-shirt estimation, story points, it's fine as well, because there are benefits, socialization, common understanding of the problem. T-shirt sizing, it's fine as well. But if you want to use what we've been talking about here, this is CCPM and the buffers. If you got flow time data, you are one air away from being able to do explicit risk management, which with story points or whatever could be a bit more difficult. Okay. The thing is, the key is to build a plan at no cost.
True,
and the only way, the fast way to do the plan at no cost, because there's no waste, is to get your flow time metrics, get them, and boom, you have a plan. And tools are there to do your CCPM buffer penetration. There's tons of them that exist, and you've got the management, and you've got a system with leading indicators that tells you, hey, you got to do something, or hey, you don't have anything to do. Stop being sent on wild goose chase and let people work is something that comes very loudly in the Tameflow approach.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, John.
There were all the questions that I had for Daniel Dwaron today, and I don't see any other comments coming in. I'll just give people another minute to come in with comments. And if anybody wants to come back online, they can do that. Anybody who's on the queue, just private chat me in the window, and I can bring it back in as well. I just want to thank you very much for coming on, Daniel. Really love the work that yourself and Steve put together. Really enjoying Tameflow. And I actually had a situation last year where I was giving some Kanban training, and there was a gathering in the corner of the room because the kind of training that I was doing with it didn't deal with theory of constraints. It was omitting that. It had all sorts of other things like complexity and so on, but they had a situation where they had a constraint. It was a really obvious one. It was a very expensive one. And they were trying to figure out, because with normal Kanban, utilization is a bad thing, right? It's with something we're not big fans of. We try to maximize the flow. And in this situation, if I didn't fully utilize the constraint, we were toast.
Absolutely.
And that's when I turned to Tameflow, and that's why I reached out to you actually I know we wrote that guide last year, kanbanguides.org, but in the first addendum, we talk about Tameflow because there will be some situations, a lot of situations where people will have a constraint. And that leads me to one final question from me, actually, which is when I read the book, one of the things that I picked up was to find the constraint, you're better off removing column level WIP limits to find where the blockages in the flow, if you like. And the general guidance was that if you found a state that had longer flow time or cycle time, whatever you want to call it, that was probably your constraint. Is that the right way of saying it? Or are there other situations where there could be a constraint, but it's not necessarily got the longest flow time?
Well, the thing is that you got constraint in the work process, the workflow, and work execution. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you work, that's the one. If you're looking at a team that is a constraint in the workflow,
Yeah.
Well, you have got to take advantage of that team's constraint. And the team's constraint is the process among all the process that takes the longest time. So in this example, in UAT and integration, we see that the average flow time to integration is 5 days. And the other process development is 2 days, and UAT is 2 days, and deploy is 2 days. So the constraint in that work process of team A is integration. So the last thing you want is for integration to sit idle and not have work and be starving to work for work.
Yeah.
So what you do is once you have team A, that is a constraint in the workflow, you look at the constraint in the work process, which is UAT, and you put buffers in front of UAT, either on a drum buffer rope Kanban board, DBR, or a throughput management board, where you also put a buffer in front of the constraint so that it does not starve. Every time your constraint does not work, you are losing money. And Tameflow and Kanban with the column width limits, you just don't know where the constraint is. And with column width limits, you can probably be in a position where you would succeed in starving the constraint. So you see that in the throughput management board, we have no width limits. We have no width limits. Okay? Width limits create special cause variation. You increase the width limit to decrease the special cause variation. And the more special cause variation, the more you will be led to change width limits. And the more you change width limits, the more the visual clues will tell you to change width limits again.
Okay, thank you very much. Jersey, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing Jersey's name properly, but he joined a couple of times in StreamYard and dropped off. Oh, here he is again. I'm going to bring him in now. Jersey, welcome. Am I pronouncing your name properly? How should I pronounce your name? Can you hear us, Jersey? We can see you, but you need to confirm you can hear us. I'm not sure if Jersey can hear me. Okay. Might have an audio problem. Okay. I'll remove Jersey just for now until we get the audio checked, because we can't really connect with them.
My name is Jerzy. So
thank you so much. Good, thank you. So, do you have any questions or comments for Daniel?
Yeah, I can hear. For the moment, yeah, there were some problems, but now we're gone. So okay.
Okay. So, do you have any questions or comments, Jersey? You're live on air. What would you like? Do you have any questions? I think there's a delay. Okay, I might need to drop you off for now because I think there's a miscommunication. Okay. Once more, do you have any questions for us? No. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that, Daniel. I'm not sure what's going on there.
It's all right. It's all billable time, John.
I wish. Thank you so much. I'm just going to bring in Nader for just one last comment and stir the muck a little bit. And I see another comment as well on the channel. So Nader, I'm just going to bring you in now.
Sure.
You're up.
Hi, Daniel. Another one question for me and also clarification for me. So the buffer we built in Tameflow before the constraint, my understanding is, and then I get my understanding is you have it in 3 sections. You know, the first 1/3, you know, you're still in the green. If it goes below that, then you're in amber, and then you go to red if you like, if you go beyond that.
Yes.
Now, that works if you have a capacity constraint resource. And if your constraint is a non-instant availability, would it work the other way around? Would the buffer work the other way around? In other words, as soon as you start depleting it, you're kind of in amber and red.
Okay. The constraints that you're talking about are column width limits, paradigm. No matter what is the cause of your constraint, it is a constraint. And if you have a constraint, you have got to put a buffer there to protect the constraint. Okay? It could be whatever it is, like you say,
NIA, non-instant availability. Yeah.
And CCR or whatever. It can be all of that. There's no reason in particular why one would create whatever the cause of the constraint. It's indicated by the average flow time of that process. It can be anything you want, but it is visible, and this is where you act. So yeah, your point is valid. But as to the cause of what it could be, well, what we gather is that in this case it's integration. And once we've identified the constraint, you know what the 5 other step of the 5FS is, eh? Identify the constraint, exploit the constraint, subordinate to the constraint, elevate the constraint, and repeat. So you've got the first few steps right.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Nader, thank you so much. I'm going to drop you off. Thank you so much for joining. And Daniel, I have another question from YouTube. It's from, I think it's LOL Master Games is the name of the ID. Here's the question. I'm not that familiar with Tameflow, and I'm aware we are focusing on risk management, but excuse my ignorance if it is the wrong question, but how do we deal with preset dates by upper management?
Very interesting. There's this little thing in Kanban, right? Where you know the flow time of each of your work items, okay? So the business risk of getting things done is not on the execution team, it's on management, because management knows that a market analysis, because we have flow time data, the management knows that market analysis takes 3 weeks to perform 85% of the time, okay? So management, knowing this, has to bear the business risk of when to start the work and not to tell the execution team, you are going to finish the work at that time, okay? So in Kanban and also in Tameflow, the scheduling and putting the work in place is part of what we put upstream responsibilities into full cutting, ranking, prioritizing, and sequencing. And with that, we use metrics, okay? Metrics that management knows, okay? And the thing is nice with a throughput Kanban board as opposed to traditional Kanban board, you know that when something enters a throughput Kanban board, it is going to go at the speed of a silver bullet because we're based on throughput. You know? So having the classes of service like fixed date, expedite, standard, and this and that takes a back seat, because when you enter into a throughput management board, no matter what you put, it's just going to go crazy and fast.
Thank you, Daniel. That's great. And so I put just on the footer of the stream here that training for this is available at tameflow.com.
Yes.
Tame the flow, as in like tame the lion, tame the flow. And it's a brilliant combination of Kanban, theory of constraints, and throughput accounting. So I want to thank you so much, Daniel, for coming on today, and absolute pleasure having you.
And don't forget to invite Steve Tendon for he's all willing, he's all waiting for deeper conversations.
Fantastic! Can't wait for that.
Yeah,
I'll be in touch with Steve. Thank you so much, Daniel. Okay,
John,
everyone.
it was a pleasure, and I am very thankful.
Me too. Thank you so much for breaking my brain, you and Steve Tendon.
Hey, that's what we do.
Take care. All right. Over and out, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.